We'll just hang out here. Not a lot of, I mean, it looks like some people are watching on live. No one else has really joined us yet in this meeting area. But we play it pretty casual around these parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is when we would just be standing around drinking coffee anyway.
Right, correct. Yeah. So we'll ask you this later, but about what percentage of your office has returned?
I bet we've got a solid 40%.
Okay.
That's back. Because they never read anything I send them. They're not sure when they're supposed to be here. So we've got just kind of random showing up and not showing up, and it's working out fine. I think it will not be long before that kind of muscle memory of being in the office takes over again, and it just starts to feel more normal.
I had my first, I did a Zoom with a client, and I had forgot to send the details for the Zoom until about like 4 minutes ahead of time. So I created the event and sent the details. And when we jumped on, the first thing she said was, she basically assumed I was going to be meeting her in person. And that was the first time that's happened so far, where somebody just thought that was the norm. And it's because she's back and they're running back to fairly normal. I've had plenty of people ask if I wanted to meet in person. And I'm finding that the mix is that most people are still comfortable not meeting in person. They're just offering the opportunity if I'm comfortable. Does that make sense? Like they're not ready, but they want to be polite if other people are ready, which is so funny because I'm like, I'm not going to take meetings until I absolutely have to. In fact, by this time next week, we'll have we're getting new office desks for our home office. And I'll probably go down to Fellow maybe one day a week or so, but I'm unofficially hanging on to phase 3 as my return to more normal. So if anybody gets frustrated with me over that, I doubt they will, to be honest with you.
Well, and I think at this point, I'm starting to think ahead to not even, beyond the phases beyond this. If meeting virtually most of the time is more efficient because of travel time or something, then let's just keep doing it. Or one of our tenets with this is always keep an option, because we are part in, part out of the office. Always make virtual meeting part of the option for the meeting.
Totally. And you're not the only one saying that. In fact, one of that same client who thought we were meeting in person, they do a big kind of a all hands on deck meeting, and they've realized that they can do that remotely instead of trying to get a time that works for everybody's schedule. And they are going to miss some of the camaraderie that comes with that meeting, but it's, what are we gaining in terms of efficiency? And I've learned a lot of those same lessons. There's just some things that I think about all the time I spend driving, and not that I want to 100% do all video. I don't think that's good either. But I've had clients as far up as I had a client that was 20 minutes north of Deer Park. So I was driving almost an hour to get to him. And then on the way back, my next meeting was on the South Hill. So I was leaving Deer Park, and then it was almost an hour and a half to get to the next. And I'm like, why was I making myself crazy doing that? Somebody just got a note that they were locked out on Facebook, so I have to help them.
Well, now, you could even take a Zoom meeting in your car on the way to the next meeting, and I've done that before. If I'm running a few minutes late because I have the Zoom app on my phone, I'll just get my audio going and, Bluetooth with my little speaker in the car. And
right.
So I think it does open it up, for people that have a commute or, now we're dealing with some childcare challenges for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, schools end. So our kids are in a couple different districts, and one of them ends for sure. It sounds like next Friday. But my nieces and nephews, their school decided to end last week, so they're done. And now they had a prep for that. But you have to think, if their parents are working, that's a week or two earlier You know, and so
Mhm.
there is that accommodation, and, you know, kids aren't back in school yet. And as far as like normal, and even if they do in the fall, the talk is that they're not going to be all remote, like virtual, and they're not going to be all in the classroom, that it's going to be like a rotating set of days where some days you're in school and then a different group's in on a different day, like ABC groups or something. Well, we have our another official attendee. So let's do some introductions. As people join us, we might let them do it. And then Gretchen will just kick off and get started. And if that means we end a little early today, that's okay too. I know we're definitely approaching that time of the year, or at least this season, the time of this season where people getting a little zoomed out, I think, which is fine. The other thing that I've been doing is recording these and making them live available after. And I cannot tell you how many people watched the video one with Matt Slotemaker after, and then were emailing me saying how good it was, or even just in, like, as I was on a call with them or whatever, we're mentioning that they went back and watched, and it was over an hour. So, I mean, people consume this even after the fact. So I don't get stressed out at all about how many people are watching, but it looks like a ton of people have joined us on Facebook. So unfortunately, those folks don't get to chime in with an introduction. But we'll start with Dawn. Since you joined us, Dawn, you can give us the who you are, the what you're doing. And it looks like you're in an office. I think you're back at work.
No, this is my spare room.
Oh, okay. You just look so official.
Because I was writing a couple of papers this week, and this is my organization system.
Oh, you look so non-COVID right now. The hair is done, the collared shirt.
Tomorrow's my first haircut in like 95 or 100 days.
Wow.
I'm beyond excited.
All right, so give us the rundown. Who's Dawn?
Okay, Don Snyder. I'm with Priority Home Lending right now anyways. Certainly working on transition, and also student at Whitworth with their continuing education. So very excited about that, and hence writing papers.
Nice. Emily, why don't you fire away?
Oh, my name is Emily. I am the Client Engagement Manager at Bernardo Wills Architects, and I have the pleasure to work with Gretchen. And I worked with her a little bit on the plan, and I am part of the wipe down crew, which you'll hear about in a little bit.
We're hating life on the wipe down crew, but
so that's me.
Okay.
Don, what program are you in at Whitworth right now? Did you freeze? Never mind.
Don, did you catch that question?
No.
They asked what program are you in at Whitworth?
Operational management.
Oh, cool. Is that part of the business school?
Yes, it is.
Sweet.
Okay, and Gretchen, you're the guest of honor. Why don't you give us the rundown on Gretchen?
Gretchen, I am Gretchen and Gretchen Renz, and I always do that thing like I'm Cher, and I just don't have one name, Gretchen. So no, I am Gretchen Renz from Bernardo Wills Architects. I'm the business manager here, and just this next month, I'm starting my 29th year at Bernardo Wills. And fun fact about me is I have for almost 25 years lived in a multi-generational housing situation. My parents live next door to me, and my son and my sister and her kids, we all live together on one place. And so I highly recommend multi-generational living, especially now. It's been so easy to check on my parents and make sure that they're safe. So if anybody ever wants to talk about that, I would love to. I'm a true fan. So.
Wow. So real quick, so your sister, you said, is there with you?
She used to be. She and I purchased the place together, and then she got married and moved away. Okay. But yeah, she and her kids and my folks and Daniel and I all lived there for years.
Wow. Okay. So I invited Gretchen to be a part of this conversation this week because for a few reasons. One, as Spokane County has officially entered phase 2, and lots of people are returning to work in a different way than maybe they left. And then our North Idaho neighbors are in phase 3 or heading into phase 3. If you're in far north Idaho, I don't think you ever left whatever normal phase is. I think they just kind of continued on business as usual. But as you prepared to have your folks, and you have just over 40 people in your office, and as you prepared for that, you did a lot of really cool things. And in fact, you put together a newsletter that you sent out as a marketing tool to your list, and you talked about some of the things you went through. And I wanted to use that kind of as our template for today. And Gretchen, I just wanted to know, you did a few things that really stood out to me, but as you were getting ready to reintegrate people, what were some of those first steps that you took as you were preparing for people to return back to the Bernardo Wills office space?
Some of the first things that we did, just because of the way the information was coming so fast and the guidelines from the CDC and the state, I started just to do a ton of research. And I figured that all of us are smarter than one of us. And so I started to look and see what other companies in other parts of the state and the nation were doing. And thankfully, with the power of the internet, all that stuff is so available online. So it was nice to be able to just start gathering those resources. And it really did help me think about kind of beyond, my first instinct was, where do I buy hand sanitizer and how far apart do we put the chairs in the conference rooms? And some of this research really kind of made me stop and think. One of the posts I read, just as one of the elements, it wasn't even the main part of the blog, was, talk to the staff, see what their hot buttons are. And so my takeaway from all of that was to kind of step back from the process, because as operations, I'm all about, the process and the procedures, and really think about the people. Start the plan with the people, and then the rest of it kind of falls into place.
So tell me more about that. What was the process you went through to ask your team where they were at, and what were some of the things you learned through that?
I found a really nice survey tool that was put out by XMI. It's an HR service. And it was almost, I could use it out of the box. So I just prepared a Survey Monkey that sent it to the group. It was not anonymous. I needed to know who was, answering the questions and why. And it asked them, how worried are you about the impact of the virus personally? What are some challenges you're having working from home? Based on what we know today, when would you feel comfortable coming back to work? And, what kind of safety protocols and things should we put into place that you would like to see? And kind of what, if you had to boil it down, what is your biggest concern? And the survey results were kind of enlightening to me. People were a lot more worried about illness than I expected them to be at that stage in the process. I mean, they really worried, not only will I get sick, but will I unknowingly make someone else sick? Either, encounter exposure at work and take it home, or vice versa. How are my coworkers, how seriously are they taking this situation? And I also found out that people had a lot of kind of stored resentment over a perception that there were people prior to the shutdown that were coming to work sick, even if they weren't sick with COVID, but that they had a cold, or they had, some sort of cough or sneeze, and more than 15% of the responses, which I thought was kind of significant, mentioned that we need to make sure that when people are sick, they don't come to work. So that we don't pressure them to come to work.
Right. So a couple of things on that. So anybody watching either on Zoom or on Facebook, I've made that link available to the survey that you mentioned. So that's in the chat. So anybody who wants that, and it's a great PDF, so they can download that. Gretchen, can you talk about, like, as you plan for the future and knowing that this being sick and coming to work sick was such a big concern? And I'll tell you, that's been like the top conversation that I'm having with people, is that, like, and I've said this to both you and Emily in our meetings, like, I had the flu in December and went to work. Like, that's stupid. I didn't realize I had the flu, but I was sick enough that I should have stayed home. And I own my own business. I'm only beholden to me and then my clients. Like, I can make that decision to not go. But we had this culture in the United States is that you push through. I mean, there's even commercials that have run that are all about relieving your symptoms for the cold or flu so that you can do other things. But as you plan for the future, are you making changes to any of your HR policies or your paid time off or anything like that to accommodate that, so that people feel less pressure to come in when they're sick and feel that 100% freedom? Like, I'm not coming in because I don't want to risk anybody else's health and I don't want to risk my own.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's a combination of that HR policy. Right now, all of our paid time off is lumped into one group, your vacation and your sick hours, everything's together. And we did that years ago to kind of, it was almost not to reward, but people who weren't sick then didn't feel like they had to call in and fake it. Nobody had to call and lie to me and tell me they were sick when they weren't, because they didn't want to lose that time. But I think it also created a situation unknowingly, one of those unintended consequences, that people who came sick because they didn't want to use their vacation time for something so unfun as being sick. Mm-hmm. So I think we definitely will separate those pools of time again, so that you have sick leave and you have vacation time. And if it means that people fake it, then so be it. I think that we're in.
Oh, you're going to have to repeat yourself. We lost you. Come back, Gretchen. So Wendy and Dawn are on. Did you lose her too? Or did you lose? Yeah, okay. So just them. It's not Mr. King you lost as well? All right, good. So we'll wait. We'll wait for them to come back. While we're waiting for them, what she's talking about is actually something that Comcast did when I worked at Comcast years ago. They offered your vacation time, and then they had paid time off for sick leave, but they didn't call it sick. They called it a flex. And the flex day was something that you could use for whatever. You could use it for a doctor's appointment. You could use it for, vacation time, excuse me. You could use it for sick leave. So you had the flexibility to use vacation separately, and then you had these flex times. Sorry, ladies, we lost you there for a minute.
Yeah.
But I was just saying that similar to what you did in putting all of that time into a bucket, when I was at Comcast, they did a similar thing, but the two buckets were your vacation time was definitely your vacation time, and that was an accrual base. But then they also gave you what they called flex days. And the flex days were your sick days, but you could use them for whatever you wanted. So if you had them left over, you could use them for vacation, but you had them also if you needed a doctor's appointment or, you got legitimately sick. And I felt like there was a lot of freedom in that. And between the paid time off, the flex days that you got, and then they also did another thing where they didn't observe every federal holiday. They, as a team, we voted on ones that we would observe, like 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then a couple others. But the rest, they would give you as extra time off. So as a first-year employee, before I even stepped foot in the office, I started the year with 20 paid time off days that I could use kind of however I wanted, which is a really aggressive amount of time off. But when you think about how many times you get sick throughout the year, it was really nice. So it's refreshing to hear that you did the one bucket, but you're thinking about separating them because it creates more flexibility for your team to use them when they get sick.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I really love that idea about using that as personal time or flex time, and if and not calling it sick time, because then you don't have to think about it in terms of illness. So great idea.
So other than the people coming in, getting sick and getting other people sick and all of that, what was another result of the survey that you were a little surprised by or that you found was really impactful?
I think that I was surprised, and this was just my own reaction. I think that everyone really loved working from home. There were some big benefits. There were some isolation issues and technical issues and stuff, but generally people liked working at home. And one of the answers, was on the scale, are you rocking it? You ready to come back or whatever? And I found myself dealing with some feelings of almost rejection or something with all the people who were just like, I don't care if I ever come back to the office. And I was just like, well, don't you miss me? Kind of feeling. So, be prepared, I guess, a little bit for to personalize it. But other than that, I think it was good for me to see what they considered to be reasonable safety protocols, which pretty much fell into line with what was easy to do. I mean, nobody was demanding, bubble suits or plastic barriers or anything like that. They just felt like that if we did a little better job with intermittent cleaning in the office during the day and people wore masks and we limited visitors, that we were going to be, you know, that they would feel comfortable with that set of safety protocols.
So talk a little bit more about that piece of how many people seem to be enjoying working from home and what your plans are for the future in that regard. I mean, some spaces I see Wendy's on, and Wendy's from Deer Park Physical Therapy. She didn't get a chance to introduce herself, but I know, you know, like physical therapist, it's not a remote job in a lot of ways, right? So but knowing that your office is something a little bit different, what kind of accommodations or plans are you making as people have kind of gotten used to this? And in some cases, it sounds like people might really be enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. I think that when we've had some preliminary conversations as a management group, we do think that it's here to stay and that we would like to accommodate that as much as we can, as long as communication is still good and the product we're putting out is still, you know, as quality as we can make it, and our clients are still happy. But we are not going to allow permanent full-time remote work. Everybody will have to be in the office at least part of the time. And whether, you know, that's some part of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or, you know, some sort of rotating schedule, we do think it's important for us to be able to collaborate and to just reconnect with one another. And as much as the communication tools are there and are a benefit, there's just something about running into someone in the coffee room and having that chat that is so valuable, at least for our culture. And we want to be sure to maintain that. And that's really one of my primary concerns moving forward, is how do we build and maintain our culture when we're not always together.
So do you see that almost being like real estate offices for realtors often have like their office days and they're sort of uniform for the team? So you're in, you know, Tuesday, Thursday, and then the rest of the week, you know, you're kind of out doing your own thing. Do you envision it being some sort of mixture like that, where, you know, it's like if you want to, you know, have 3-day weekends, quote unquote, because you'll still have to work, but if you want to take like a Monday and work from home on Monday, or if you want to work from home on Fridays, but the middle of the week or whatever is you're in office days, do you see using a schedule like that?
I do. I think that would be the most workable, and it certainly would meet our clients' needs in terms of you know, there's a lot of things that especially Friday afternoons just taper off to nothing. And so if you're not in the office, then you're not really missing anything, but it would certainly be beneficial if our clients knew that, yeah, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the best time to arrange a meeting or to have a site walk.
Yeah, I just want to throw out a quick reminder. There's quite a few people watching us on Facebook, and we have, you know, the people in this room with us in Zoom. So if you have any questions, you can use the Facebook chat tool in the live video. Or the comments. I'll respond to those questions and make sure we ask Gretchen those. And if you want to use the Zoom chat, you can either let me know you have a question, you can ask it in person. I'll unmute you, or you can just type it into the chat box. Gretchen, one of those things that I was thinking about is you're talking about allowing that flexibility for your team and allowing them to work from home, maybe as part of their new normal. As you were looking back, and you don't throw anybody under the bus, but where did you see productivity during this time? Was your team able to maintain that same level of productivity? Did you see increased productivity, or did you see a decrease in productivity?
You know, I think initially there was a decrease, but we expected that. I mean, it was so sudden that we went from, you know, all here to all remote. We were still working out some of the communication issues, and we were all just kind of floored, I think, about, and I will not use an overused phrase, but we were just, you know, it was so strange and so out of our norm that we knew there was going to be some loss of productivity. In fact, we even created a new timesheet entry for COVID-19. It wasn't even leave, but just, you know, when you're all of a sudden, we had parents who were homeschooling and, you know, trying to figure it out. So if you're spending 3 hours a day on that, you know, just put that on your timesheet under that special time entry, and don't worry about whether or not you've done your 8 hours or your 10 hours. We had some people who, you know, worked a lot more than they normally do, out of anxiety or out of just the fact that it was all so easy. So we cautioned them too to, you know, create some breaks in your day. Don't work all the time. That's not healthy either. But so I think we had an immediate little decrease and then a big spurt of increase. And then it kind of tapered off to where it normally would be, just as people reacted emotionally to the situation.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really key piece here that we need to be thinking about as teams are reintroducing themselves into the office space, is that it did happen so suddenly. All of a sudden, no one's in the office. And then there's that anxiety piece that you mentioned a couple of times, and how you work through that. And I think most employers that I've heard are really being cool with that, really taking that into consideration. But it sounds like your team was able to kind of level off and find that nice sweet spot in working from home. One of the things that you said about the kids and having kids home, we have a neighbor who's works at an architecture, one of your competitors. So we'll keep them all nameless. But she works at a competitor, and she was very transparent in some of her social media posts about the struggles she was having with her kids home and having to try to figure out that work-life balance with also now providing, she's the primary person trying to provide the education for her kids now, and how that works. And I really appreciate hearing that you and your team said, like, put that down. Like, if you couldn't make it, put that down, and we're not gonna ding you for it. That kind of flexibility is really, I think, is really key in this.
Well, and I think again, yeah, that starts with that understanding about start all the policies need to start with the people. How's this going to affect people? And we were all in the same situation, trying to cope with something we've never done before. And so, yeah, if you err on the side of of extending grace and giving people room, it all comes back. I mean, you're going to get paid back tenfold in loyalty and in hard work when you need it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we've covered that whole, I really love that first tip of sending a survey and getting a feel, gauging where your team's at, and then making accommodations. And I think that's a really big piece. I think a lot of businesses, especially in the retail or restaurant sector, are really focused on the procedural part of how do we maintain safety. So let's talk about that for your team. It sounds like, your first step was let's be culturally aware of where our team's at and how we can help monitor that. What are the steps you've taken internally with your office now that you know where your team stands on making sure the office is safe for their return?
The first thing that, I think that a critical decision was around the idea of temperature taking. How are you going to assess whether people can come back into the building or not? And I decided early on that I did not want to be responsible for taking anyone's temperature or storing that information, there's all sorts of regulations surrounding that. So we are just relying on everybody to be a grown-up and assess whether or not they're safe to come into the building, visitors and guests, or visitors and staff. And so then that kind of determined how we set up sanitation stations, where we put those, how often we wipe down the building. And we've got a schedule now that, every 2 hours, all of the high touch areas, we just go through with the bleachy water and wipe everything down quickly. Mark it on a log so that, when the staff enters the area, they're able to see that, we're keeping up on those things. I think that kind of creates a feeling of comfort. And then we just set up some procedures for, how we're going to communicate, how we're going to handle our IT now that some people are in the office and some people are out. How, are visitors going to be allowed in the building? And the answer is no. Nobody comes to the second floor. You can have small client meetings, but everybody has to stay on the first floor. They have to sign in. We are encouraging people to wear masks in common areas. They don't have to wear a mask when we're at our desk because we're socially distant enough already, but just as a courtesy to one another. Wear a mask when you're going to get coffee, wear a mask when you're walking into the workroom. So our things were really pretty basic, and we decided we couldn't follow every rule to the letter. We were just going to do everything that is reasonable and that makes people feel comfortable, and we can comply with the spirit and the intent of all the regulations, but it was too hard for us to comply to the letter with everything that is coming out.
Mm-hmm. And, two, all of the safety measures cover the main concerns of the staff, which I think is the biggest one. Gretchen let them decide, what the most important kind of tenets are in our reintegration policy. And if we cover that and our people feel safe, that feels pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, you said a couple things I want to key in on here. One, and I don't know if you said it this way, but you talked about using the space to your advantage, especially when you're a business that does see outside, you have clients that come in. Not every business is going to be that in that place, but I think of Wendy, like I said, who's on the call, and they are bringing clients into their space. I really like how you talked about using the space to your advantage. Was that just inherent because you're architects and you already think about space all the time, or was that like an aha moment that you came to?
Probably a little bit of both. And we just have this natural kind of separation in our building between, it was easy to create a public space and a private space, if you will, because all of our offices are on one floor and all of our meeting rooms are on another. But I think too, some of that was part of the research, just thinking about, traffic patterns in our office and capacities of the rooms. And I think that maybe we did think of it a little bit more in those terms because that's the language of our business. But it was easy to, just to think about each space and think about, okay, what's a safe number of people that could be in here? And how can we minimize those interactions that might provide exposure.
The other thing you said that I really appreciated was the spirit of what you're trying to accomplish. Like you can go the legalistic route and then no one's happy because you're being, either hyper strict or whatever. But then the other piece you said, talking about letting adults be adults and trusting them to make good decisions. I definitely think that there's a lot to be said for, here's the big picture guidelines that we're going to work to follow based on your feedback, based on what's being recommended. And we're going to do our best, and we know we're not going to get it perfect. And I think there's giving people that leeway, because it's not natural. Like if I get up out of my desk, I'm like zoned in and I need to go refill my coffee and I forget to put on my mask. Like if you drop the hammer on that person, like what good does that accomplish? Versus a gentle reminder, or even just letting them get there and see, oh my gosh, everybody else has a mask on and I don't. So I love that spirit of what you're trying to accomplish versus just being true to the law and to like the requirements.
I do have to say though that as we were, communicating the staff to the plan, and I fulfill that office sort of mom role, and it's just by virtue, I've been here a long time. I gave the little lecture about, this is all really built on the pillars of responsibility, consideration, and understanding. Mm-hmm. And the first person who comes to my office to tattle that so-and-so was in the coffee room without a mask is getting sent home. I mean, because we've got to be, we've got to be understanding with one another. You're right. We're not going to get it right all the time. We're going to forget. But if we understand that, it was just an accident, nobody's out there being reckless. We need to give each other some grace, and tattling is not okay.
Oh my gosh, what a key thing. Sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Well, it's like sometimes we're our worst. I mean, for me, Gretchen's been really good with her mask, but we've been in the building without everybody since March 15th. And so we're now accustomed to a certain way of operating in our own spaces because Gretchen and I kind of decided, and our office manager too, that, well, we're in this together. It's kind of like we're quarantining together, the three of us in the building, and we have plenty of space to work with here and stay distant as much as we can. But so, now that people are here, it's like I have to kind of flip that switch in my brain too of, I've noticed going up to get a copy in the room that I haven't, had my mask on. So, the staff, have had to adjust, and we've had to adjust too. And I haven't been perfect, and kind of understanding that we are doing our best, if that's running back to grab our mask or just apologize, if I run into somebody, just letting them know that it's on my brain too. Even I might not be perfect, but I'm trying, and keeping that sense, of empathy and understanding with one another, but that it's an adjustment. And I think we'll get more into that rhythm. We've been in this 3 days. This is our 4th morning. So we're still working out our wipe down schedule and getting into the new routine now.
So thinking about like pre-COVID times, what you're doing now for office safety and cleanliness would seem extreme. Like if you could travel back in time and Gretchen, you could tell January Gretchen, like, here's the thing, you do not have enough hand sanitizer or bleach for what's about to happen. But just knowing that like so much of this makes some sense in just like, especially around flu season, just like with the accommodation that you're making with your team to be flexible and work from home, what sort of safety things do you see maintaining long term that you would have never thought about if it weren't for this situation?
Well, I do think that it makes some sense to buy hand sanitizer every time you find it, and stock up on Clorox wipes. No, but no, I think it does make sense, especially certain times of the year, like you said, to go through midway through the day. We wouldn't do it every 2 hours, but wipe down the coffee machine, wipe down the common use phones and items that are out there that everybody is touching. Take extra care with the coffee pot handles and how we do some things. I don't think we'll be quite so cavalier as we have been. In fact, I have been carrying gloves in my car to use at the gas station and at the ATM. And it's occurred to me that I probably never should have touched a gas station pump. Ew. And so it's those kind of things that I think we will take a little extra time with. But some of it I think we'll be really glad to get rid of when the time comes. I don't like having visitors sign in. I don't like having the door locked so that people can't just come and go as they wish.
One thing I've thought about, I am totally one of those people who will not stay home if they are feeling sick. And that is something in my brain I need to work on and change. But having the option to work from home and have it be more normalized in our companies so that we have the tools to do it really well now. We're all now comfortable hopping on a Teams meeting or hopping on Zoom. And also, having those masks. One thing that's come to my attention is, in other countries, it's very normal, if people are feeling unwell, to wear a mask on the train or, on their commute. And so I thought, man, if it's a symbol to the people I work with, I'm feeling kind of under the weather today. I hope it's allergies. It might not be, to throw a mask on. And that, I don't know if we'll see that everywhere, but for me personally, it's like, that's something I would have felt ashamed to do before. So
yeah, 2 months ago, it would have been over dramatic
to
go around in a mask.
Yeah.
But now I do think that, some of those things are normalized, and it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think, Emily, the flexibility to work from home creates that opportunity to have your cake and eat it too when you're sick. Like sometimes I'm sick, I'm not sick enough to not work, but I'm certainly sick enough that I shouldn't be around humans, other humans, and spreading it. And I definitely think that added flexibility, and that's something I was talking about a lot. Like it's just going to be me calling my clients more often and saying, look, I can't make it today. And the other thing is, it would have never occurred to me in December when I had the flu to do it by Zoom. Like having a video meeting in town seemed like stupid. And now I'm like, well, it actually makes a ton of sense. But we would have never got here without that. All right. So Gretchen, we've covered a ton of ground, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about how you're handling your team. In the email that you sent out, your marketing email, you talked about the communication tools that you're using, especially as you've worked remotely. And I wanted to key in on a couple. You talked about you've used Zoom and virtual meeting as a part of this. And I think, who hasn't, right? I mean, I know some people are still using some of the other ones, GoToMeeting and things like that. But the one that really stood out to me was Microsoft Teams as a communication tool. There are other options out there. You know, I've used Slack in the past. There's other things. Why did you settle on Teams? How did you settle on Teams? What's the result been? What would you do different? Like, how have you maintained communication, and what are the takeaways from that?
We settled on Teams because we have Office 365 subscriptions and it came with. And so I don't know that we even really investigated other options. And then again, it happened so fast that we had it, and we had just actually started using it about 2 weeks before this all happened. You know, mid to late February, we started encouraging our groups to use Teams in the office for chat. And some of it, we had reconfigured the office and taken out a major movement spine. So all of a sudden, instead of being able to cut across the office, you had to walk all the way around. And so we started using Teams internally because we were tired of walking all the way around and realizing someone wasn't at their desk or they were on the phone. So laziness came into play. But so then we started using Teams, and we've encouraged it both as kind of a social aspect and as strictly project communications. We have channels for, you know, talking about food. We have channels for sharing jokes. We have channels for bragging about our kids and selling things and fundraising. And so there's a channel for all the Jeep owners get together and can talk about Jeeps. And we also have it broken down really neat into, you know, ask an interior designer, ask a landscape architect. And so one of the questions this week, one of the marketing coordinator said, you know, I've got a bunch of weeds in the gravel in my yard. What should I do? She posted that on the landscape architect thing. And one of our landscape architects, James, wrote this fabulous response with links and information and details. And that's going to be a blog post and then maybe a speaking engagement, because it was so perfect. And so I think it's really helped us kind of connect, especially as we've been apart socially. One of the architects has a new corgi puppy, and so every day he sends us a picture, his daily Maggie, where we get to see the picture of this thing. And when we were all separated and feeling so unsure of what was going to happen, just getting the daily Maggie every day was really encouraging, and it just made us feel good. So we do have teams that are, you know, channels set up specifically for projects where we can invite guests. And that's one of the nice things about Teams is, you know, you don't have to be a Microsoft 365 user to invite outsiders to our team as guests for those particular channels. But I've been encouraged just how much it's kind of recreated some of that inter-office chatter while we've been apart.
Sorry, I was taking notes. It's hard to ask questions, and I got to follow up with a blog post. This has been so good. I think, you know, whether you land on Teams or Slack or any one of those tools, I think you've talked about more than what I would have expected with that. You know, one, it just helped increase the flow of communication while everybody was working remotely. But even as you made that adjustment to Microsoft Teams before COVID-19, you were seeing an increase in inter-office communication that was lost, whether it was due to, you know, restructuring your office layout, or just the fact that it's easier to just type something than it is to get up and walk across. And even with 42 people in the office, there just may be people that you just didn't socially communicate with a bunch for whatever reason. And now you might find yourself communicating more. So from a team building perspective, it's funny to see how a technology piece that you think might remove communication actually has enhanced communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I think that, you know, really in an HR standpoint, it's going to create some problems because we've now got it all on our phones and we're available to one another 24/7. So yeah, it's like one of those good bad things where, you know, do we ever created now this situation that because it's instant, we expect an immediate answer when we reach out to a teammate, even though, you know, it's 9 o'clock at night, you know, and where do we start to draw those lines too?
So I've found that even in running my own business, that I have to draw that boundary pretty early with clients that, you know, I'm Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And, you know, if you want to message me afterwards, those hours, that's fine on the weekends, but don't expect a response unless the world is burning down. You know what I mean? Like unless your website's down or somebody's, throwing daggers on Facebook, like I'm not going to jump in. But there's something else that you talked about, like allowing something like Microsoft Teams or Slack to replace the instant access that text messaging might have afforded you. And when you think about, like, text messaging is such a hyper personal way to communicate with somebody, because it's, you're probably a bring your own device office. You're not providing cell phones for everybody. So when I text a team member, I'm texting them on a personal device, and just replacing that with Microsoft Teams and saying, hey, nope, that's the place to do that now. We're not going to text message each other unless it's an actual, like, emergency. You might find over time those boundaries start to develop themselves.
I hope so, because then there's, questions of discoverability and, are these chats, we've talked already about, how do we capture text, project related texts from someone's own device, and that expectation of privacy. But that's another topic for another day, but it all kind of works together. So
yeah. So thinking again about how you've managed this with your team, there's another aspect that we haven't really touched on too much, which is how you integrate clients into this. And you've talked a little bit about how you're keeping meetings with clients to the first floor. So I would love to talk a little bit about that, but also how are you managing your team that might be leaving the office to go to a remote meeting, to go to a site meeting or to meet with a client somewhere else? Like, what are the kind of the boundaries that you set around that?
The big fence is you do not have to go anywhere that you don't feel safe. We have a particular project that I'm thinking of that is at a hospital facility that had known COVID cases and, really close community. And we were being pressured to visit that site to do some measurements. And we just said, no, if you don't feel safe, you don't go. And I think that, setting that big fence made them, I think, everybody feel comfortable within that. But then most of our clients have specific, job site guidelines. And so our instruction is then, you follow the contractor's guidelines or the client's guidelines to the letter. If he says wear a mask, you wear a mask. If he says sign in, you sign in. If they want to take your temperature, you just need to comply with those rules. And I think that by and large, because construction opened earlier than some of the other offices, staff have gotten used to doing that. We also encourage them to do virtual walkthroughs. I mean, the superintendent can take his phone and FaceTime anything that you need to see on the site. So if that's an option, let's start there. If you have to go to the site, follow their rules. And if you don't feel safe, don't go.
Oh, I thought I unmuted myself, but I think I may have actually muted myself. I think you said something that I want to make sure everybody heard, which is the management has to be supportive of the team's safety. And if the team feels like they're being put in a situation that's not safe, they need to know that the whole ownership management team is behind them and will support them with the client. So I really like hearing that, Gretchen. I was put in a position, like I said, I report to myself as my own business. And when this thing first happened, I had a client when I said, I'm going all remote. My kids are home, they're not in school. I'm going to go all remote. We wanted to be around grandparents and stuff. So we felt like the best thing to do was to really do a strict 14-day or whatever quarantine. So when I told one of my clients that I was going all Zoom, I got some incredible pushback. And I had to put my foot down. I mean, there was almost like a little bit of bullying because of the way it was politicized, and we don't have to dig into that. But how nice it would, and I just had to stand up for myself, but how nice it would be to be in an environment where if you're like, I don't want to go to a hospital, and then knowing that you or the management team is going to come right behind him and say, you don't have to.
Yeah. And I think it's important to create that foundation for people, especially when there was, legitimate concerns for health. I mean, it wasn't, no, I just don't want to go. It doesn't fit into my schedule. It's, I am worried. And yeah, our clients are our lifeblood, but so are the people that we work with every day. I mean, and I think if it's like a family first kind of thing, if I'm going to err on the side of the people, my coworkers.
Yeah, exactly. Have you had any clients that have come into the space with some of the new guidelines that maybe were that glad handing client that loves to come upstairs and interact and say hi? Have you had any of those clients respond negatively, or has everyone been pretty receptive to the "you're staying downstairs" concept?
I think for the most part, everybody's been really understanding and pretty compliant. Um, as Emily said, we're on day 4. And so we had a client meeting yesterday, and I think it went pretty well. I mean, he signed the log, and he washed his hands, and he, stood on the footprints, and so it went well. I don't think he brought his kids with him. We have that kind of atmosphere. So sometimes clients come and they've got kiddos with them, and so I think that everybody is still, because it's so brand new, they're probably all kind of being a little more circumspect about it.
Yeah. So we had a question come in back during the conversation about Microsoft Teams and how you're using that. And Becky was asking on Facebook about the policy for usage. And it sounds like we may have covered her question, but I just want to double back and say, do you have plans to maybe formalize your team guidelines? Like, hey, you can respond at all hours, but if it's after 5, don't expect a response, or, anything like that. Are you considering a formal adoption of a policy?
Probably should be. I think some of it is maybe already covered by some of our software and internet use policies, but I think it's a good idea maybe to include that information like in our texting policy, because it is that instant messaging sort of concept about what needs to be then taken out of Teams and put into the project file, and maybe clarify a little bit more where those boundaries are. So yes, good idea.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing on with this client conversation, your firm, one of your primary objectives is to build communities. I know that because I work with you closely, but part of that is you're working with people that are creating usable spaces where they have their own clients coming in and they have their own interactions with, whether it's a customer service interaction or a client interaction or whatever. How many questions are you getting, or are you starting to see people think differently about their own spaces? And are they calling you and leaning on you as sort of experts in just space in general to help guide them through this process?
Yes, I think we are getting calls, and we are encouraging, especially like the interior design group and some of the space planners, to reach out to clients and talk about, what can we help you do? I think that people are thinking differently about their space, not just their current space and how to make it more compliant or make it more pandemic proof, if you will. But what's the next space going to look like? How is this going to change interior design and office layout in particular moving forward? So yes, we are starting to get those calls, and Michelle, one of the interior designers, has done a lot of research just kind of about, how do we move forward, and how does this change layout and furniture design and things to make us feel safer, feel more distant.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating how, this thing, as long as for however long COVID-19 will last, I think like as a real threat to public health and safety, there's a greater thing that you think about when it comes to how that's going to impact so many other areas, especially when you think about, you do a lot of work with medical practices, whether it's orthodontists and dentists all the way to, dermatologists, but how they create safe spaces in just their waiting rooms, and what adjustments they might be making, and what adjustments your team might be making, and how they design and lay those out, and what kind of advice they give.
Well, and I think, it's going to affect school design. It's going to affect recreation opportunities. And we're kind of excited. Just, those kind of changes are exciting for a design community, because you get to think differently and you get to be innovative. It's unfortunate that it's, because of a pandemic and a health crisis that those changes are being made. But yeah, it's an exciting change, and it's a chance to really think differently about how we do our work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to jump in, just remind people watching on Facebook and anybody here on Zoom, feel free to ask questions. Dawn did just share a resource for bulk hand sanitizer. So check the chat if you want that. So anybody watching on Facebook, I'll make sure to share that link there. Yeah, bulk hand sanitizer. Way to go, Dawn. Gretchen, looking back, and as we wait for maybe some other questions to come in, looking back now, and I know you're only 4 days into this new world and you're only 4 days into having people back in the office, but thinking more about the transition that you made, that immediate transition from people being in the office to sending people to work from home. If you could go back and wave a wand and maybe change something or fix something, what would you have done a little differently as you think about, hindsight being 2020 and the lessons that you've learned?
So let me think. So how would I change how we sent them off, or how would I change what we had done before? I'm not sure.
All of the above. Anything from when you knew that you were going to send folks home all the way through, the last 4 days. Anything that that really stood out to you as an opportunity to go, oh, I would have probably handled that a little differently.
I don't.
You nailed it.
Overconfident, but actually just in February, gotten everyone on a laptop so that they could work remotely, or to facilitate working remotely, not with this in mind at all. Just that had been our plan. We bought the laptops in November and we started deploying them. And, I think that, I think our management group, I have to give them credit. They were so open-handed. And when we started moving people off site and they said, okay, it was like Oprah, you need a monitor, we'll get you a monitor, and you get a monitor, and you get a monitor, and you get a monitor. And we went to Costco 3 times and bought every 32-inch monitor they had, and just made sure, they did everything they could to make people feel like this was going to be okay. We'll get you equipped, do you need a better internet connection? We'll pay for a data upgrade. We'll do that. And so I think that their knee-jerk response was so good to just, get people feeling supported so they could, be productive, whatever it took. And then we started to think about, okay, and how's this going to affect the bottom line, and, what's going to happen with our projects. But their first response was, let's give everybody what they need so that they can feel productive. So I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, that connectivity issue is such a huge piece, right? And it's something that my kids have dealt with. I had to upgrade our cable modem, and then because I wasn't renting one from our provider, and then I had to upgrade our Wi-Fi all in the same week. And I don't go cheap when I do that stuff, so I know the cost associated with that. Thankfully, our service to the house was fine. But my kiddos' teachers have been dealing with that in their own homes. Like, they're trying to lead a Zoom and then they keep getting stuck, and connectivity. Yeah. So I think it's really refreshing to hear that your team was supported by the management ownership, not just in like, hey, we'll get you the equipment you need, but if you can't get the internet you need, or it doesn't fit your budget, we'll help you out with that too, especially with the file sizes that you all deal with, and that level of just the project you work on. And then, so one other thing you said that I wanted to key in on, it just flew out the window. Never mind. I don't get to ask that. As we kind of wrap up this conversation, is there anything else that stood out to you? I want to give you an opportunity to brag on your team, and you've done a lot of that, especially the management. But what is something that maybe you haven't mentioned yet that really stood out to you as like a big positive takeaway from your team that just really, as a person in your position, made you so proud of them?
I think just the resilience of all of them. And it's like not one specific thing as much as a lot of little things, just how they showed up every day. And we got good participation in, virtual social events, something that was brand new to us. And, and what can be really awkward is just to sit around and look at your coworkers drink on a little square and make polite chit chat remotely. And so I think that feeling on my part that they really did want to connect, and that they really did want to, that our strength was together as a group, that made me proud that they still, we're living our values,
Mhm.
even though they weren't in our building. And that value of honesty and of connection and of doing the right thing for our clients. And, I've been so proud of just how we've come together.
And one thing that, struck me kind of, that has to do with resilience and has to do with kind of overcoming all of our, nobody likes to change, or, I mean, sometimes it's difficult to learn a new thing when you are maybe dealing with change in your personal life, like your family dynamic now that your kids are home or your partner is also home, or, so in the midst of dealing with all of that change, people embrace the new technology, which I think is a really big deal. Folks who had never maybe run a Zoom meeting on their own, or, really we were using Teams for the internal chat, but the Teams meetings were all new. The embrace of the technology and running, full speed ahead, trying to figure it out. Those first few weeks, we were doing a lot of troubleshooting, and I think that's a big deal. And it's easy to give up and say, you know what, screw it, I'll call them on the phone. And sometimes you need to do that. You need to pivot. But I was really impressed with people who had never been on Zoom before showing up to the Zoom meeting. And I think that's just a testament to that spirit and that courage to do something new because it's the right thing to do. And so
I think Emily, on that point, like that excuse of like I'm not good at technology, I just don't think is gonna fly in this new normal, because you had to. I think for so many people, they had to figure it out.
And you see people's true character and their spirit in times of crisis,
Mm-hmm.
whether that be, me observing my managers and the owners of the company and what character, they're exhibiting, and also kind of the strength of my colleagues too.
Our IT leader, and he really shoulders the burden alone, Steve, he was, I think if this whole experience has shown us that he is absolutely key. And it helps that he's a fabulous architect and a nice person, but oh my gosh, he worked diligently and so hard to get, OneDrive set up so that we could share files and get, people, he would call them or Teams them to work through a connection issue. Even, in the midst of a Zoom meeting, he was sending information about, okay, your headphone isn't working, try this, and look at this setting. And so, I think that if anyone in this whole thing gets the crown and the gold star, it's definitely Steve. And he was so patient. One of our employees broke their brand new monitor accidentally, and I was all fussy about it. And he said, this person is more important than a monitor. And so he brought me back to that value. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, you're right. And we went and got a new monitor. But it was just, organizations need people like that. And I was just so grateful for him.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I learned about Steve, I'm writing, for our social media, kind of a little spotlight on him, which I love to learn about people and how they view themselves. And I asked him the question, what's your motto, or what's, the best advice you've ever received? And he wrote, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And when you see, I've seen him do that and be kind and patient with his colleagues on top of his own personal, we all have personal stress and projects and workload. And so I saw him really walk the walk for 2 months. So I echo Gretchen and would encourage anyone, to look for the helpers, because they're there, and build them up in this time. And so they're there, and there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of stress in our lives, but when you get the privilege to work with people like that, it reminds you why we're all here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, couple more things, and then I'll let you two skedaddle. One, Becky shared a resource if anybody's looking for face shields or anything like that to accommodate their office space. Mountain Dog Sign Company. The link is in the chat. She shared the link on Facebook as well. But she also had a question about all these extra costs that you and your team have had to absorb, and if you've created a plan or any sort of a system to maybe recover some of those costs, or what your plan is to recoup them, or how you're managing that. Only share what you feel comfortable with, by the way.
You know, I've just been tracking it as part of the cost of doing business. I mean, this is an unusual circumstance. We haven't been in this situation before. And so, you know, I think we'll just have to absorb that cost and hope for the best.
Yeah, with my own business, I've been doing the same thing. Like, we've had to accommodate some costs, and then same thing. We didn't break a monitor, but we did have one of our kids in the middle of a Zoom spill an entire glass of water on a laptop. So we lost the laptop, but the laptop's not as important as that child, although he is mowing lawns for the rest of the summer for free to recover that cost. And you know, when I started doing Zoom workshops, I think I did like 7 in a row, and then I've done 2 business brews in this format. I learned early on, when it comes to this environment, just things are going to go wrong, right? Like, and you have to be, and you've echoed that throughout this entire morning, that, you know, things are going to go wrong and they're not going to go according to plan. But as long as everybody's, and Gretchen, you said this, and it's so powerful, as long as everyone has grace and is extending grace, you're going to be fine. And Emily said, you know, you're really going to find people's true character. And I think that's also something that's really important, is that, you know, when you've built a good team, you're going to find that the character that's going to shine in these moments is positive. And, you know, I suspect there are teams out there that are losing valuable members or people they thought were valuable because they didn't exhibit the same, you know, values that you both have mentioned all morning. And they realized they weren't a fit. And that's a bummer, but I think there's that necessary cleaning. I had a client call it dead wood once, which I thought was a really aggressive way to say that. But yeah. Okay. So any last minute thoughts before I definitely want to leave room for questions, but I think the questions have kind of come to a standstill. Somebody did say thank you. Becky's been saying thank you for being such awesome role models. Don chimed in. Thanks for being here and sharing the great information. He appreciates you both. Any last minute thoughts before we call it a morning?
Nothing specific, other than just, you know, this is a situation where it's best to be flexible. Don't get married to your plan. If it's not working, it's okay to change it. And yeah, just do what's reasonable and what is kind of best for everybody. The goods of the many come into play in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, extend grace to yourself too. You know, I've come into work, and sometimes it's hard to kind of rally your own attitude and get excited about it. It's like, oh, it's okay. I'm going to give myself this morning to be down or to worry, and then I'm going to at lunchtime I'm going to refocus. And so I think, you know, sometimes it's easier to extend grace to the people that you love and the people that you care about, your colleagues, and it's more difficult to say, you know what, it's okay if I have a bad day too. So what did I read? It's okay to be in a pit, just don't decorate it. You know, so it's okay to be in the mud, just don't get comfortable down there. So to give yourself some credit, because we're all dealing with a lot of change.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points to end on. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. Gretchen, thank you so much for bringing all of your experience and wisdom to this conversation. It's super valuable. And Emily, thank you for coming and being a supportive voice. It's really nice to get both of your perspectives on how you've managed this. Can't thank you enough for joining us. I look forward to when we get to do Business Brew in person again. Not sure when that'll be. I don't know that there's a space big enough for 20 people to all stay 6 feet apart, but maybe. So thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing more about how this journey goes for you two and your office.
All right. Thank you, Josh.
Bye, Josh.
Bye.